Okay, so one of the third topic that we're going to discuss tonight, again, is another chagrin for thousands and thousands, indeed millions of Australians. That's allergy. And just to give you a couple of percentages here, so 1 in 10 adults has asthma, 1 in 5 children. I forget the stats about how many grow out of it and then how many grow back into it. 15% of the population suffers from rhinitis, allergic rhinitis. What floored me, absolutely floored me when I looked at the data, was 30% of the population at any one time suffers dermatitis. That's huge. Oh, sorry, forgive me. Let me say that correctly. That was erroneous. 30% of people at some stage in their life suffer from a dermatological condition. And that's massive. Now, tonight, it's too huge a topic to discuss food allergy or intolerance, because that's largely gut-based and a huge issue with treatment regimes. So we won't be discussing food allergy, but I think there's been a huge changing face of allergy over the last 30 odd years. Would you agree?
I always saw a lot of what we refer to as allergically based conditions going back 30 odd years.
Mm-hmm.
I reflect in my Gosford practice, eczemas were very, very popular,
mm-hmm.
and I saw a lot of asthmas, so it's difficult for me to confirm that. No, I think they've always been there.
Yeah. What about allergic rhinitis with the allergic salute?
No, the allergic rhinitis is, there's an explosion of that. Yeah. There's an explosion of that. I can't, and I'm reflecting back now 35 years, which is a long time, but I do remember my practice was built in the old days on helping with asthmas, mm-hmm. particularly when we're able to use many of the herbs that we can't use now. And eczemas, I always did well with eczema because eczema was my own experience. That's what got me into the profession, my own resolution of eczema. So I've always been pretty good on the skin and the respiratory system, but the explosion in rhinitis is something that I'd concur with you. I rarely saw that in the old days.
There was the old allergic salute, you know, that sort of thing with the kids and things. But allergy is a multi-million-dollar. I think the turnover of antihistaminergic medicines has doubled over 15 years. The prescriptions of them, the sales of them has doubled over 15 years.
Well, I think we do remarkably well. I think that the naturopathic herbal approach to managing those particular conditions that you've been referring to, which are considered to be allergy-based, I think an understanding of the successes that we can get with this should be a feather in our cap, because in each of those conditions, I would rather treat an atopic condition than anything else, because the remedies that we'll be talking about momentarily have proven to be so successful that despite a lot of the sophisticated, restrictive, eliminatory dietary procedures that people present with, in many cases with no effect whatsoever, in some cases compromising the person's health, in some cases pushing them towards almost an anorexic condition. Even with that scenario, I have seen a sensible use of the right herbs, which are in your product, and I was using them, and I would argue before they were in your product.
No, absolutely, it's a new product.
those herbs which are in allergy care, and again, I applaud you for that product. It's a top product because it contains Scutellaria bicalensis, and it contains Perilla. And those two herbs in the last 10 years, particularly, have altered the face of particularly my achievements in managing rhinitis conditions. So I think this is an area where we undersell ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on a lady that saw me some months ago from Singleton. This was a lady that had, when she presented, very, very nasty call it dermatitis, call it eczema. But her hands were a mess, and she had been using topical steroids for quite some time, which was a problem in itself.
Yeah.
The biggest problem was that she had been put onto a diet from medical managers. From Singleton, she came to Sydney to get dietary advice that was on eliminatory lines, and went on to this dietary program. The diet became so constricted that the weight just fell off her.
Yeah.
It interfered with the whole family structure because she was frightened to go out to dinner. She reaches a state of almost anorexia, and the treatment wasn't working.
Yeah.
I saw that lady's condition reversed with a three-pronged assault. In a condition where the hands were so violently inflammatory, my approach is to start by using high doses of the fluid extract of licorice, anything up to 5 mils 3 times daily, even pushing to the point of a bit of fluid retention, which, by the way, I haven't seen that much of. But the highest pharmacopoeial doses of licorice, she was placed on 3 times daily. I also prescribed bioflavonoids, and I have said before this session that your preparation called quercetane is probably as important for allergy management as your product allergy care. I had for years been using my own preparation based on the Pisorno and Murray literature. Read Pisorno and Murray in the section dealing with eczema, and you'll see the emphasis that they place there on the use of the bioflavonoids, particularly quercetin. I took on board their encouragement and developed a little product of my own for my own patients. It's not something I distribute, it's something for my own patients, comprised primarily of quercetin, rutin, bromelain and vitamin C. I put that lady on a teaspoonful of that daily. It's a potent preparation. And use a topical application initially of 0.5% hydrocortisone, equal parts with my GA cream.
Yep, that's the deglycerizinized.
That's right. So the 0.5% hydrocortisone blended equal parts with my GA cream allowed her to get a disproportionately impressive topical benefit. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, the steroid application had ceased. She was just using a bit of the GA cream based on glycyrrhetinic acid. She had started to attenuate her dietary fanaticism. And eventually we slid her off the licorice and placed her prophylactically onto a combination of Perilla and Scutellaria bicalensis. That lady today lives a normal life in Singleton. She goes out regularly with her husband on a Friday night. He's a miner, so he makes a lot of money in the Hunter Valley. She is no longer obsessed with what she eats, and her hands are perfect, and I see her probably irregularly once every couple of months. So when we're talking about herbs in your allergy care product, herbs like Perilla and Scutellaria bicalensis, they are, in my opinion, two of the most underrated herbs, particularly for managing atopic conditions in our profession. They are not spoken about enough. For instance, in my management, say, of an upper respiratory tract problem, which might involve patient presenting with conjunctival symptoms, redness of the eyes, wateriness of the eyes, that frequently accompanies something like a rhinitis condition. The combination of bicalensis, Scutellaria bicalensis, Perilla, reinforced by typical older fashioned herbs like eyebright and hydrastis or golden seal, the results are startlingly impressive, and see many people who have hitherto been dependent on antihistamines, nasal steroids, walk away from those conditions. So a preparation like allergy care with quercetane, in my opinion, in my practice, with my own different prescribing of liquids and powders, confirms the efficacy of it.
And we were just talking about Denis's pragmatic patient base with naturopath here in the audience about this use of the proteolytic enzymes, so the quercetin, the bromelains, things like that, and also the other enzymes. But and the pragmatism was the anti-inflammatory action is supposed to be restricted to taking it on an empty stomach, but at some stage you've still got to get it into your patient. So we all agree, just take it.
Yeah.
So it's just take it, and you can get quite a quick action from taking very high dose like quercetin or quercetin. Very quick action.
That's the thing that I think needs to be emphasised, that high dosage here, in my opinion, is the clue to getting that preparation quercetin working.
Yeah.
So that little combination, what I mean, allergy care and quercetin for upper respiratory tract allergies alone is a remarkable combination.
Perilla's got a name, if you like, or some of the research suggests that it's Th2 inhibition. I've got my concerns about people thinking of the Th1, Th2 seesaw, because it's not a seesaw. It's a bendy seesaw. They're comorbid. There's other Th subsets being developed, like Th9 in dermatitis, Th17 in autoimmune disease. So there's a lot more there than just a swing. It swings and roundabouts. But the perilla does tend to ease away, tends to inhibit that Th2 and bring it back to a normal thing, which might explain helping your lady, which we talk about the mashed potato and peas brigade.
Yeah, could do.
Yeah.
Could do.
And I wonder if that's got partly to do with, dampening an inflammatory, an aberrant inflammatory response back to a more normal response, so that they're able to test the waters, if you like, with some of these bad foods and achieve what we call antigenic ambivalence. That is, that they're not reacting by having a small amount. Would you agree with that? Or
I do. The interesting thing about perilla is there seems to be a lot of emphasis being placed on rosmarinic acid.
Yep.
I'm impressed with that. It does have an active, but again, I would caution against seeing the action of perilla being overly dependent on rosmarinic acid. And I see already in the literature some preparations of perilla being doctored with additional levels of rosmarinic acid. And I see that as a problem, because this tends to encourage my view that there's a movement in the natural drug industry towards doctoring up herbs with disproportionately high levels of so-called actives. That worries me.
Yeah.
I'm much more impressed with what you've done with your preparation, and that is bringing a rosemary extract, because there you're using a herb. You are not overly emphasising the isolate. So I'm not too concerned whether it is the rosmarinic acid or whatever. My perilla that I have traditionally worked with is basically based on the liquid extract, which is confirmed by TLC, and which is administered in the correct dosage and does the job.
Yeah. Do you use Albizia, Lebec?
I don't, because there are only so many things that one can use.
Yeah.
But again, it's got an excellent reputation in other systems of medicine as having almost equivalent actions to perilla and Scutellaria.
Yeah. I've only used them together. Sorry, forgive me. I've mainly used them together, but one of my personal treatments was I had this incredible rhinorrhea one time, and it was actually attending a seminar of somebody. But the only herb that this herbalist could give me was Bicol skullcap. Has anybody ever tasted Bicol skullcap? It's like hazelnuts times 10,000. So I had this 200 ml bottle, and I think I took around about 120 mils during this seminar, but it just ceased it. It was amazing. And this rhinorrhea, I've never had it since. Profuse. And it stopped it. It's quite a dramatic effect. Of course, I was going like this all the time. So we've spoken about the perilla, the Bicol skullcap, and there's the Albizia in there. Some people say that the Albizia has a sort of if you like, a faster action, whereas the Bicol skullcap has a more longitudinal effect. I don't know whether that's based on any data.
It's got a good reputation in Ayurvedic medicine.
Yeah, but would you agree with fast and slow though, or do you think they're both, they need to be taken for a while to get effect? Yeah.
Well, with Scutellaria and with perilla,
you get good effects.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you're in private medicine, unsponsored by government, you've got to get results reasonably quickly, otherwise you're out of business.
Yeah.
So with those two herbs in particular, I would, if we're on the money and going to be getting anywhere with them, I would expect to see some indication of movement in the right direction, even within the first consultation period of 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's not necessarily resolution, but that is an indication that movement is occurring in the right direction.
Yeah.
And if a patient of mine is not getting better by the second consultation, I'll lose them. So if these things we're talking about, to me, are not hypothetical. They've got to work to keep me in business.
That's right.
And they've kept me in business for 35 years and fed 400 kids and 11 grandkids. So they do work, and they work in that sort of period of time.
Yeah. So let's finish off on allergy there. Now to something very dear to your heart, the future of herbal medicine. Where do you see herbal medicine is headed in the near future?
It's difficult to say. I think one of the problems that has occurred is that science and technology has taken herbal medicine into a different domain, i.e. phytotherapy, and that could see a lot of the traditions, the empirical emphasis, wane, and that would be a great tragedy. It would see younger herbalists and naturopaths, for instance, not brought in contact with some of the great names of herbalism, Mrs. Maud Grieve, C.F. Lyle, Swinburne Clymer, Fletcher Hydes. These people, Herbert Barker, these people whose works, whose practices, whose perseverance really allowed herbal medicine to undergo the renaissance that took place in this country and in the United States and in Great Britain in 1970. So what worries me is the emphasis on phytotherapy, the science, the heaviness of evidence-based. For God's sake, what is more evidence-based than the empirical background of herbal medicine?
Yeah, that's right.
That worries me. And falling into the hands of the wrong people could see a lot of pressure being put onto the tradition and the traditional side of it. That's one thing that worries me. The other thing that worries me increasingly is the cost. And I've said earlier, one thing in your favour is that you are presenting products that are very economical. And it's becoming, as I said earlier, very difficult using liquid products in the right dose to make the system available across the board. That's a real worry, the cost spiral and the way in which our medicine, which is private medicine, is increasingly becoming the domain of those that have got money.
Yeah.
That worries me. And the other thing that worries me is the attitude of government. I think this is something that needs to be looked at. We are here. There are pressures that don't like what we do. There are professions that feel threatened. There are vested interests that want to grab what we've established. Remember, what we're talking about now 35 years ago would have been laughed at by mainstream pharmacy. What worries me now is that we've given credibility. And by the way, I applaud good pharmacists. I've taught so many of them. And the young pharmacy graduates today are great people. I'm not attacking that at all. All I'm saying is that we have created something now which some see in some professions as being rightly theirs. And they have the political power and the money in order to challenge that. So I think the renaissance has occurred. Now we're confronted with whether we're going to see that momentum maintained or whether or not it's grabbed and taken in under another umbrella.
So along that lines, and this may be a confrontational sort of, or certainly a controversial thing, about registration. Do you support registration of herbalists and naturopaths?
It's a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's a two-edged sword. For instance, if registration demands a university degree in herbal medicine or Western herbal medicine, I would not be able to be registered. Despite the fact that I have been an associate professor informing the herbal therapy faculty in the University of Newcastle on the Ourimbah campus. And despite my having taught all my professional life and taught hundreds, young graduates coming out with a degree from an appropriate tertiary institution would presumably be given greater preference for registration than myself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of problems associated with registration. I see the danger that a lot of good people might be locked out by the bureaucratic structures that are brought into play, and that could be a really very, very sad thing. So, and look, it won't worry me. I'm an old man. At my stage in life, it doesn't worry you too much.
I was about to say, why don't we bring in a grandfather clause?
Well, I'm already there. But my point is, it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
I can't see it really doing us that much good. If you're a good practitioner, you'll build a practice.
Yep.
If you're not a good practitioner, whether you're registered or not, you won't survive.
Yeah.
And the way we practice today, we all have professional indemnity, so the public is being safeguarded. It's difficult today for a person just to put their shingle out and call themselves a herbalist or a naturopath. They wouldn't be able to survive. The ordinary public knows what to look for. So on the balance of it, I'm not for registration.
And I think the last question is when, and we've covered this in a couple of topics, especially things like depression and the diabetes. When do you think it's appropriate to, I don't like the words bow down, but to incorporate, to pay homage to orthodox medical treatment of whatever disease?
All the time.
And when do you think it's appropriate to stand firm and to say, no, my patient chooses this form of medicine?
Yeah. Look, again, I feel more comfortable today working within the mainstream than ever I've done. I have said to my to my students for years now, if you haven't got an understanding of the drugs of modern medicine and the protocols of modern medicine, in my opinion, you shouldn't be out there. So I'm happy working within the mainstream, even though the mainstream might not, all of them might not like me. I'm comfortable in working with the mainstream. I guess what disappoints me is the attempt by some still in the mainstream to attempt to refute what is irrefutable.
Yeah.
That is, patients get better on our treatments. And there is a point at which I will stand firm and defend the benefit and the efficacy of a treatment in the face of some cynic or sceptic who still, after 35 years, sees me as a quack and someone who shouldn't be practicing medicine of any strand.
Those people who rely on only the double-blind placebo-controlled trial should read a very interesting study that was published in British Medical Journal 2003 by Smith and Pell, and it was the use of parachutes to prevent traumatic injury by gravitational challenge. Who wants to go in the placebo arm of that one? Yeah. So it's a really interesting concept, isn't it? And there are some groups out there pushing for outcome studies rather than the double-blind. So you're getting a giggle. So I'm sure that there are those of you out there in practice being presented every day with difficult patients. We have, as you know, with us in front of you, one of the great experts of herbal medicine. So I think now is the time to open up the floor to any questions that you might have. Would anybody like to ask a question? If we could perhaps grab the microphone and just get people to speak into the microphone. Oh, there's one just by you, Kirsten. There's a lady just by you there.
My background is medical, mainstream, but the question I'd like to ask is what sort of ability is there to assess the responsiveness of a person to a herbal product? Is there a variation of responsiveness depending on certain circumstances, or?
I would agree. I think the variation of responses would be very similar to mainstream medicine.
Yes.
You would have some patients that would respond particularly well to a protocol. We would have similarly. There are some patients that do no good at all.
So
on our
we go back to
system.
metabolic pathways and good responders and non-responders.
And individuality, yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things that we really are losing sight of as an industry is, and the reason I think is largely because of fear, is patient individuality. We want protocols, you know, and we want them because, we want them to feel safe. But my issue is a protocol implies that you've done research on every single thing that's in there and in the dosages that you're recommending. Those studies have not been done. That's the whole point of us being holistic. So this biochemical individuality of the patient must ring true. You must be able to use it.
Well,
Does that answer?
the next question there runs on to, I see herbal medicine as a supplement to orthodox medicine on the basis of people that don't respond to the pharmaceutical drugs. And therefore there must be some sort of research that could be worked with the two products and who would respond to what.
I think that's probably happening, but not to a great degree. I would be the most contented person if I saw a lot of what we're talking about tonight being embraced and even utilised by mainstream medicine. I would feel very comfortable if I saw naturopaths and medical herbalists being referred to as allied healthcare practitioners being drawn upon, or their skills being drawn upon by their prime contact manager, which must always be the general practitioner, to be used to augment, say, a medical treatment, or to be used in place of a medical treatment.
Yeah, well, we certainly have pockets that we can't treat.
Yeah.
And one of them is people with anxiety, panic, depression, and people that then turn to things like narcotics and drugs of dependency because we can't offer them products. And I feel there's certainly a great need for research in those areas.
I think that's an area that is likely to be more used today, as I see a lot of the conditions being dealt with at a team level.
Yeah, well, I did actually speak to someone at the University of Western Sydney over a year ago who was very keen to see research in that. It would be good if that was taken up, particularly for people in the outer west that don't have good nutrition, so they don't have a good basis to start with, and their bodies are shot really already from the start with bad nutritional.
Just a point about the genomics comment that you made. The genomics age is certainly upon us, and they're now looking at, amongst other drugs, the one that I am keen on or interested in is that they're looking at different genomics, different alleles, different genomes, who respond better or worse to tamoxifen. So they're now looking at which patient group they should give tamoxifen to and who will respond to it and which won't.
Well, we should also be integrating herbal medicine in that way.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Yes, there's one up here.
Being pushed to make it become integrated, or is everyone sitting back fearful of the fact that big pharma and Western medicine has hold of all medicine?
Yeah.
I'm wondering there's people in our generation that are really focusing on let's stand up to this. What's happening? Why can't medicine be integrated?
Yeah.
Why can't homeopaths and naturopaths work alongside each other? Having a brilliant art book. I've suffered chronic disease. I've had near death, and what brought me to life was naturopathy and homeopathy. And as you was discussing just then, because of this big pharma and government getting involved and all this ego crap, the person that saved my life, was a teacher at all these colleges, wrote most of the books that we read in college, she's been totally cut off and told she can no longer practice because she did her study 30 years ago. Now she's a genius like you. You may know of her, Lulu Zenzak. She's in Perth. I went to Perth. She is incredible. She knows so much knowledge. And she can no longer practice. Where is a grandfather clause? She's been speaking to me about, like I said, why can't you push that in your career throughout? I chose to do naturopathy saved my life through chronic diseases. you
Well,
know?
well, a grandfather clause would only be instituted if you got registered, right? So,
What does that mean?
okay, so let me take it back to what I am. I'm a registered nurse, and we had to, there was a change in government policy, i.e. we want to save money,
Yeah.
and that's all it was. So what the government did was take it out of hospitals and put it into colleges, universities. The first year they did that, they saved $117 million, right? So the nurses that had been very well trained in the hospital system then went, what about me? We don't have a piece of paper. What happens to us? So they were given a certain amount of years, and I think it was 15 years. I think they were given 15 years as a grandfather clause to say you have 15 years to get your qualifications up to speed, up to check. Now, forgive me if that number of years isn't right, but they were given a decent amount of years. But that comes with that start. So if herbalists and naturopaths wanted it, then the first step is registration. And it's a double-edged sword because you are then government registered, you are government bound, if you like. Now, I don't necessarily have a total paranoia about when we see what's happened with the acupuncturists, with the TCM practitioners. They've done it very well, thank you. They're telling the doctors you can't call yourself an acupuncturist now. So as long as you've got you know exactly what you are, and I think herbalists are a lot clearer than naturopaths as to not just what they are but what they aren't. A herbalist knows what they aren't. But you also need very strong personalities, extremely strong, driven, focused personalities.
So what you're saying with registration, if we become registered, does that mean that we get to keep our certificate and after 15 years it doesn't go away? Is that what you're saying?
I'd like to say yes, but that's up to Giselle's laughing. It's up to you to lobby. It's up to you to lobby.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Are we doing that collectively, or are we just sitting around doing our work and letting this, twinkle away in the background, and then it comes 20 years' time and it doesn't exist?
So can I ask, can people hands up here? Hands up who has heard of Arona? Right. That's why. That's your issue.
What's wrong?
That's exactly it. What is Arona? So why don't we talk afterward?
Because I would love to start a movement in this. I would put my
To heck with it.
energy.
Okay, the Arona is the Australian Register of Naturopaths and Herbalists. They are one of, to me, one of the more focused. There are others. But we do certainly support Arona in their endeavours. We support what they're about. There's a lady up the back. Sorry, Giselle.
As of yesterday, they're taking applications for memberships, and they are actually reviewing grandfather clauses as well. So go on the website because they're accepting memberships.
Could you say that once more, please?
Yep.
That was really important.
From the 1st of July, so from yesterday, they were actually taking memberships. So you can go online, you can look at the qualifications required. If you don't have those qualifications, you can submit for approval. There are grandfather clauses for those that have been practicing and other options for what you can do. So speak to them.
Thank you. Giselle, you wanted to add something?
Oh, there's an organisation called FOSM, Friends of Science and Medicine, who is single-handedly trying to eradicate complementary medicine, alternative medicine from the face of the earth. There is a new organisation called FOCM, Friends of Complementary Medicine.
Love it.
Oh,
brilliant.
You can download the app for Coffin.
Only Mark could do that.
And what we encourage you to do is upload your evidence. So upload your evidence for research, data, literature. So the more body of evidence we have, the more literature and data we have, we're just going to groundswell this organisation to say the evidence is there for what we do. We've got clinical evidence, we've got research evidence, it's all there. We've been integrated for at least 30 years, so it's been happening. We just have to have the evidence, and we have to have a collective location to put that information. So download the app for FOCM and become active.
But I think I really do agree with Dennis's point that we must hold on to our art as well as embracing the science. Would you agree? That's right.
And that's what's happening because we're all just sitting back fearful. What are we frightened of? That's my question. Who are we frightened of? Who is the person we're frightened of?
Dwyer.
Seems to be being
Is this being taped? Are there any more questions? Anybody who might have some... Oh, sorry, Giselle, yes, you have another
I have a
question.
question for Des. I have a concern that I think paediatric herbal medicine hasn't been explored and included in a lot of commercial product lines as much as I'd like to see it. I love my blister tract herbs and they're disappearing one at a time. I've been able to reverse anaphylactic disease in children, using 2 blister tract herbs. So they're powerful, even though they're much lower dose. The kids love them. They'll take babies will take them.
Yep.
So with tablets like this, I'm not sure if they've been studied to see how young, because I do give these herbs to infants. So I'd like to be able to see safe preparations formulated for infants, even newborns.
Yeah, there's a lot of call. A lot of call.
Just thinking what you might have to say
Certainly,
on that, Denis.
glucofactors fort is totally contraindicated in children. If you've ever... Has anybody here ever tasted alpha-lipoic acid? Chili flavoured battery acid. That's what it tastes like. It's horrible. So don't be opening that capsule. And I would actually caution against, it's not contraindicated, but just make sure they have food if they've got hiatus hernia. So just make sure that you've got some food behind it so that they don't burp it back up. It can be rather uncomfortable. So I think if people have more personal questions or something that they'd like to...
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Giselle.
My
Sorry.
response to that, and it'll be a final response to everything, my response to that, Gazelle, is look, as you probably know, it was Southern Cross that introduced the glycic tract, and they're great preparations. The problem that we now face is that the industry seems to be structuring, particularly at the liquid level, more and more around a selective range of products that sell quickly and sell well. The likelihood of there being glycic tract products, whether it be for the adult or for the juvenile, is pretty remote unless you're doing it yourself. I concur with you. I think paediatric possibilities in this system of medicine are incredible. But I'm really honest with you and say that I've become more conservative the older I've got in taking on paediatric conditions, mainly because I've seen an assertion of dominance by paediatricians who, even in my situation, have not cajoled but given the impression to younger GPs that this is their domain, the domain of the paediatrician. And I would concur with you. It's not in... when I first started off, a vast majority of my patients were kids with eczemas and coughs and colds. They were the heyday of my practice. I still stand by those situations. But my observation as I near conclusion of my professional life is that it's becoming more difficult, if you're not a medical practitioner, to treat paediatric cases. And your point about the preparations, you're not going to see glycic tracts. You're not going to see them because the companies, in my opinion, would not be interested in going down that pathway these days.
Sad. So I do invite you, if you have more personal questions, to come up and speak to Denis. I, for one, thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure that we've got some beautiful clinical pearls to take home and to incorporate into your practice from tomorrow onwards. But I really do thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's such an honour to sit up with you here tonight.
You flatter me. You flatter me.
Thank you, Denis. Cheers, mate.
Well, we'll go, shall we?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.